Kia ora, and welcome to Whānau Mārama New Zealand International Film Festival 2024. We've been lucky enough to welcome some extraordinary filmmakers from all corners of the globe to take part in this year's festival, and today's featured artist is no exception. Latvian director and editor Gints Zilbalodis wowed audiences at Cannes with his immersive animated film, Flow, which tells the surreal tale of an unlikely group of animals who must overcome their differences to survive a great flood. Here, Gintz talks to Whānau Mārama 2024 Artistic Director Paolo Bertolin about the film and his innovations in animation. This Q&A was recorded live at the Civic Theatre in Tāmaki Makaurau Auckland on Wednesday 14th of August as part of Whānau Mārama New Zealand International Film Festival 2024. Enjoy.
To break the ice, Gintz, I would like to go back to what you said at the beginning of the screening. You mentioned how this film is very personal and how this also means for you a step up or forward in terms of your professional experience or career, in terms of working with a group, which reflects also what happens in the film with the cat. So the question for me is, do you identify with the cat in the film?
Yeah, of course, and not just the cat. I identify with all of the characters in some way. I think it's necessary to kind of have that, to kind of make something, to create characters that even if behave differently than I would, but it's important that there's no there's not a villain in the film. Everyone has their own goals, but I think we can understand why they behave this way, even if even if we don't agree, we should understand that. And the cat. People keep asking me if I'm like a cat person, and I think I think I prefer the company of dogs more than cats. But I think myself I'm behaving more like a cat than a dog.
And in terms of the depiction or design of these animals in the film, what is really striking is that they really look natural. I mean, they move and behave and sound like real animals. Can you tell us a little bit more of the process in getting to achieve that?
So it starts with the script. So we try to consider the limitations that the characters would have in this situation, and of course there are a few artistic liberties where we needed to kind of move the story forwards, but for the most part we try to limit the things that they do and the thought process of the characters to what would be like appropriate for these types of animals, and then the animators took a lot of reference for every single moment. There is a reference video of a cat turning its head or like twitching its nose or small things. So everything is really like studied, and the sounds as well. We used real animal sounds. We didn't use human voices to mimic the animals, and for the most part we tried to stick with the actual animals, except the capybara and the bird were a little bit, especially the capybara was not the actual voices, because they didn't really sound really pleasant, and we needed something more calming in this case. But the cat is actually, I think it's pretty much just one cat, the voice we used, which was the cat of the sound designer. And so he tried to record the cat, but the cat never spoke when he was recording him. So he had to hide the microphones, and then the cat would speak.
There is a question up here, please.
This undoubtedly is the most beautiful two-dimensional drawn movie I've ever seen. And I think all of us here would like to congratulate you on the unbelievably superb production. It's almost inconceivable to think that you could have actually drawn every single one of those things. And would it be too cheeky to ask, was it all two-dimensional?
Yeah, it's actually not 2D at all. It's all 3D animation. But our goal was to make something that looks more graphic than the typical 3D film, and to kind of only use detail where it's necessary, and to kind of have the best of both worlds, where you get the immersive aspects of 3D film, where you can explore the environments and you're not just observing it from a distance, but you're participating. So the camera movement was very important to me, how the camera is, it's really like the main tool I have in terms of the filmmaking to evoke emotion. So, but at the same time, we didn't want to like, we wanted to use other, like the color, the textures also in a deliberate way, and to kind of only use it, where it's necessary. And I think the backgrounds are a little bit more detailed and the characters are somewhat more simplified, and that's on purpose to kind of allow the audience to project themselves onto the characters, and kind of, because if it would be like a photo real cat, then it would be like one specific cat, but in this case everyone can see their own cats in this character and see themselves as well. So it's kind of what animation is good at, is that kind of, well, kind of stripping away the unnecessary parts and kind of finding the essence, and then it becomes more kind of universal.
Of all the characters in the film, the only one that doesn't seem to fit in with natural animals as we know them is the cetacean that saves the cat, and then the cat comes to comfort at the end of its life. So was that creature modelled on a genuine whale, or is it purely a fantastic creation?
We started in the earlier versions, we used an actual whale, but then I've thought it was necessary to create a sense of fear, and I felt like the whale wasn't scary enough, and because we know that we shouldn't be afraid of them, so we exaggerated the design and also made it more mythic and kind of unknown, and we also reveal it gradually. We don't see it at first, and the role of that character grew while making the film. At first it was very minor role, but while making the animatic, which is kind of the editing and the cinematography process, I added more and more scenes with the whale, and in the script, even in the final draft, the final scene, there was no whale, and so that was a late addition. And if you stayed after the credits, there's an additional scene, and that was like super late addition, like a month before the release. And so it kept evolving very organically, which is not typical for an animated film. Usually there's a lot more structure, and but in this case we were really improvising a lot and kind of discovering ideas and letting them inspire us, and so the whale is an example of that.
Yes, please. Yes.
As a zoologist and somebody who's passionate about wildlife, I'm intrigued to know how you pick the species. They're an eclectic mix: a capybara, a ring-tailed lemur, and a cat and a dog, and and the bird. I'd like to know how you made that decision.
Yeah, it started with the cat, because I made a short film many years ago when I was a teenager, about my cat, and the story was just about the cat's fear of water, and then when I decided to revisit the story recently, I decided to shift the attention on the group dynamic of having to work within the group, and all of the animals were chosen according to the theme of the story, which is that that need to belong somewhere in a group, or in the cat's case, not wanting to belong and being independent, but it's like it's connected to that. And so to have like an opposite of the cat, I put the dog there, because it's like the cat starts out as very independent and ends up being like accepting others, and the dog is in the opposite journey, where it starts out being like a follower, and then ends up being more independent. And other animals were also considered based on this idea of wanting to belong or not wanting to belong. So even if it's not clear at first that why the lemur is collecting all that stuff, it's his idea of being accepted, and the bird is also desperate to be accepted by his flock, which has abandoned it. And so it was thinking about how these different characters would interact with each other, and how it might challenge the cat or kind of support it on its journey, and to have like a variety of animals. So one is a bird, and one is like the lemur behaves differently than the cat and the dog, and finally the capybara was the one that doesn't learn anything. Like usually all the animals are on a kind of journey of kind of they change, but the capybara doesn't, and that was important because I wanted to have a character who kind of, despite all the differences, remains calm. And I saw just images of capybaras being very friendly to every type of animal, and it gave me a lot of ideas for the story and comedy and so yeah, it was it's quite challenging to kind of keep the focus when having like an ensemble of characters, so that each of them have enough focus in the story, and they're distinctive enough, and yeah, so that was a bit of a challenge, but I think it worked in the end.
Kia ora. Can you elaborate a little bit on your 5-year journey from start to finish, and some breaks in there or not?
So I finished my previous film Away, which I made completely by myself, so it was a much smaller production. And then I figured I would try and work in a team. And at first I was just developing the script, and then I brought on another filmmaker, a friend of mine, who helped with the script, and then he also became the main producer. And that took again some time to find the funding in different funding institutions, and then later we brought on different producers in France and Belgium as well, and then we kept like developing the script and making the animatic, which is like creating the editing and the cinematography and figuring out the look of the film. So by the time we started the actual production, which means when the animators start to actually like create the performances, we'd already spent 4 years, and then the production was like half a year, which was the more intense part, where we had the full team. But for the most part, it was just me and eventually just a few people in our studio. And the main team was there just for a few months. And so when the animation is finished, then we do the lighting and all the effects, the water, the sound, which also takes a long time. And which is, 5 years is a long time, but for an animated film, it's quite typical. There are some animated films that take 7 years or 10 years, so I think we did it pretty quickly, considering that the production was very short.
There was a question up. Yeah, please.
Could you talk more about the challenges of moving from being a solo filmmaker to working in a team and how you overcame those?
Yeah, so the big challenge is for the first time I'm actually directing people, because before I was just having an idea and I could execute it myself, but now I have to articulate my thoughts, and so it's a different skill I hadn't really used. And so I tried to be really prepared, and I looked at a lot of references and gave a lot of pretty detailed notes, and yeah, just I found it stressful just managing people, to being responsible for the budget, which is a big responsibility for people's time. I don't want to waste anyone's time and effort, and yeah, that was like for me it's easier to work alone, so I can have enough time to process things and work at my own pace. But this time I'm focusing on something very specific, and someone asks me a question, I have to switch my mind to something completely different, so it can be draining to always having switching ideas and keeping everything in your head, because we didn't have we had the script, but the team didn't really use it. It was just for me, so they had to ask me all kinds of questions. So I always have answers, and not always I had them. And so I know some filmmakers who know exactly what to do and they have everything planned out, but I'm not really like that. I like to kind of find my way during the process. So sometimes when I'm asked a question, I don't have an answer immediately, and I think that's okay. And you can collaborate with people and maybe ask them for an idea, and then they also feel more involved, and I think they do a better job when they feel like they're actually contributing. And so we tried to have the animators had, I think, a lot of freedom, even though we had really a pretty good plan, and we didn't have any deleted scenes. We came really prepared, but the animators could suggest things, and sometimes that means I had to go back and change the camera or change something else to fit their new idea. But if it helps the story, we allowed the animators to also contribute.
Yes, over there, please.
If I'm watching a Disney film or something like The Lion King, you can tell all the lions apart because Scar looks, they've designed all the characters. In this film, apart from all the dogs looking different and the lemurs wearing some hats, sometimes I had to figure out, the birds, for example, which one was the bird from context, which one was our friend bird, and which one were the random birds. So what was the challenge of writing something with no dialogue, where animals could often quite look similar, to tell the audience, this is the bird we care about, or this is the lemur we've been following this whole time?
Yeah, so in case of the bird, I guess we don't really only when they're separated we can tell them apart. But it wasn't necessary in the story to at that point because it's from the cat's point of view. So I don't know. The smaller birds I guess are more apparent because they're darker. The feathers and it wasn't really a concern to me. I think it's I don't know. I didn't really think about that. Sorry.
Joe Gintz no Latvias. Paldies, ka atbrauc. Thank you for movie. This was a really, really touching movie, and I'm happy that you made this movie. And I wanted to know if you like, were you ready that your movie will be so successful? Like, when you finished the movie, did you had this feeling that it will go to Academy Awards and it will go to NC, like win all those awards and the Certain Regard Festival, like the selection in Cannes? Yeah, that's the question. Yeah.
No, you can never know. It's yeah, you have all this control when you're making the film, but then you finish it, and it really depends on other people if they connect to it or not. Or so that's kind of a scary thing for especially for an animation filmmaker, where you have all the control, and then the next moment you don't have any control. So it's really a lot about the luck and the right timing, and because in Cannes it's very rare that they select animation. This year there was more than usual, but it's for many years. I think the last time was 5 years ago that there was an animated film in Cannes, so we didn't take that for granted, and that was like a big hope. But of course we had no idea that it would happen. But it was a bit scary for us because we submitted still a work in progress film, as it sometimes happens, and then we had to finish it on time, and it was basically finished like the day before I actually flew there. So the last month was very intense. Not just the last month, everything was intense, but it was like a very motivating factor to I couldn't procrastinate, so sometimes that's good.
Kia ora. Thank you for a lovely piece of work that you've put together. I enjoyed the gaff scale that you had going through there. I guess that's a style of boat. Are you a sailor? And is it the sense of freedom that you get from sailing that you put in the imagery there?
No, I'm not really experienced with sailing, but we did look at a lot of references and really studied how the boats work, and the boat was also designed in a way to somewhat make sense, partially at least, that the animals could control it. So we had to tweak the design, because the story takes place mostly in that boat. It was important that it keeps being interesting, and that it remains open, that it doesn't feel claustrophobic, that we can always see the environments But yeah, I think animation is really about the movement, and the sailing, the water, and the flight is something that's, I think animation is great at, and you can that's something that really the team did. That's not really a credit to me. They did a lot of research, and I'm really proud of the work that they did.
I think there was another question.
I'm just over here. I'm just wanting to ask you, in the big scheme of things here, you've had an idea, and largely around survival and shared survival in the face of, massive catastrophic environmental, in this case. But I was really interested when you shifted to universal theme, briefly. You had a cosmic kind of reference where the cat and was it a crane? Crane was lifting.
It's a secretary bird.
Okay, and they were lifting off into the light. So there's obviously a very deep, wider theme here. Could you address that a little?
No, I think it's the deeper theme is throughout the film. It's not just that scene. It's really about kind of accepting others and others accepting you, and also you accepting yourself. What was which was the final scene, and it's really in these smaller moments, maybe which on the surface seem like just some comedic bit of interaction with the animals. It's really, everything is connected to that, and it's really built around that idea. So yeah, I think it's like without the dialogue you can really, as I mentioned before, the audience can project themselves onto these characters, and can, by having that journey be as simple as possible, and that way I think it can be more universal and kind of like music, which I like, which is quite simple and stripped of any unnecessary parts, and can built on layers upon layers. So yeah, it came down to that idea of kind of wanting to belong.
Maybe one last question. Yeah, okay, here in the front.
It's not really a question, because I wouldn't know how to ask it, but there were so many beautiful water pictures, and the cat got wet a lot, but there was no water coming off the cat. Like, you know, when it, you know, came out of the water and shook itself, I was always expecting these water droplets flying off, but it was always like it came out of the water, like, I don't want to use the word slick, but just not really wet. And there was always this kind of, huh? What? You just came out of the water, but you don't really look wet, or, yeah, and it shook itself, and there were just no water droplets, yet there were perfect water droplets later on. So I just thought, ask you for a comment. Maybe it's even nothing, but I know that it was something that I constantly kept like expecting, and then it didn't come.
Yeah, I don't know. I will consider that. No, I don't know. It's like it was. We did the parts which felt necessary. So we looked at a lot of references, and the animals were, the fur is quite short for most of them. So they're. You wouldn't. There wouldn't be a big difference whether it's wet or not, I guess.
As a way to wrap the Q&A, can I ask you something that is related to the earlier question about the universal message of the film? Because indeed, this is a journey for the cat, who we see from the beginning as the protagonist, as the independent character who learns how to live and collaborate with other characters who are different from himself. So the question for me is also, through this, you know, natural catastrophe, is it also about like creating new different kind of bonds, a new sense of community beyond those differences? Is this part of the message?
Well, I didn't want to like give like a didactic kind of message that being independent is bad and working together is always good. And we wanted to, that's why the dog is also there to kind of show the different aspects, and the cat doesn't change entirely. He still has those anxieties. There's some things you can't just change about yourself. It's who you are, and it's just kind of learning to live with that and accepting that, and maybe like kind of figuring out your place in the world, and So that emotional honesty is important, that you don't like overlook some things that are unsolvable, or kind of you shouldn't actually solve, which are okay. But yeah, I was a bit like having doubts about the ending for some period, because it's kind of left open in some ways, or doesn't end with this big climactic thing. It's just these characters looking at each other, and it's really until the end, with the music, with the performances that the animators gave and everything coming together, I felt more confident. But while making it, it was really I wasn't sure if it would work or not.
Okay, I think we ran out of time. I would like to thank you for staying with us for the Q&A, and of course, thank you so much, Gintz, for the insight that you gave us on flow. Thank you.
Thank you.